The sound you hear is not a distress call from an ordinary maritime accident. This is the death cry of Putin's billion-dollar shadow fleet. On the evening of November 28th, two giant tankers, the lifeblood of Russia, the Kairos and the Virat, experienced hell within minutes of each other. That night, these two ghosts were sailing off the coast of Kandıra-Kefken on the main trade highway from Istanbul to the Black Sea. This is not just any random spot in the open sea. This is a mandatory route for thousands of ships and one of the world's most secure maritime corridors, where Turkish Coast Guard is on high alert. The ships were sailing empty, bound for Novorossiysk, Russia's main oil terminal on the Black Sea, to pick up cargo. The captain's plan was simple: blend in with the thousands of ships leaving the strait, sail to Novorossiysk under the cover of Turkish territorial waters, and deliver the oil money to the Kremlin. But they were wrong. They were not invisible. They were being watched. The first blow struck the Kairos at around 8:30 p.m. According to official reports from the Turkish Maritime Directorate and maritime traffic data in the region, a violent tremor occurred in the ship's engine room. As the crew activated the fire suppression systems, the shock of the incident had not yet subsided when the second, more devastating blow struck. Minutes later, another ship on the same route was rocked by devastating explosions. In the same area, the panicked announcement from the Virat tanker echoed across all Black Sea frequencies.
East, I need help. Drone attack. Drone attack.
The Kremlin is hiding behind its usual technical malfunction excuse. However, the crew's cry, which you just heard on the open frequency radio, has shattered Russia's entire policy of denial. And OSINT data from the field is screaming the truth in our faces. Ukrainian naval drones are now hunting Russian ships, even in the most protected waters. Turkish authorities reported that a comprehensive rescue operation was launched after two Russian ghost ships caught fire. Thanks to the swift intervention of Turkish Coast Guard and rescue teams, the crews of both ships were rescued, 25 people from the Kairos and 20 from the Virat. This attack was most likely carried out by the Ukrainian Security Service, SBU, and Navy in a joint operation using Magura V5 or Sea Baby class unmanned surface vehicles, USVs. These drones are not simple boats. They are the deadliest hunters of asymmetric warfare, equipped with ranges exceeding 800 kilometers, 300-kilogram warheads, and real-time image transmission systems controlled via satellite, Starlink. This was a daring operation extending to the busiest trade route of a NATO country. The fact that the ships were empty at the time spared the Kandıra coastline and the Black Sea ecosystem from a massive environmental disaster. But it did not save Putin from economic disaster, because the message delivered was more powerful than the exploding bomb. Whether you try to break the embargo or seek refuge in NATO waters, at the bottom of the Turkish Navy, whether you are loaded or empty, we will find you. Look, if you read this incident as a simple ship fire, you're missing the big picture. The timing and target selection of the attack were not coincidental. The targets were not the hull, but directly the most vulnerable part of the ships, the stern, i.e., the propeller and engine room. The fire in the engine room of the Kairos immobilized the ship, putting it in a mission-kill state. This is a technical success. Instead of sinking a ship weighing thousands of tons, the USV operator chose to immobilize it, turning it into a burning monument of warning in the middle of the sea. Although Russia's official statements again point to an accident or gas leak, radio recordings from the scene and the damage profile on the hull confirm that this was an organized, planned, and high-tech ambush. This is not a hit-and-run action, but a declaration of area domination. Ukraine says, no Russian ship leaving the port of Novorossiysk can guarantee it will reach the Straits safely. This fire off Kandıra is actually burning not the ship, but the money in the Russian treasury. We need to pause here and ask the dangerous question on everyone's mind. How did Ukraine's drones travel more than 600 kilometers from the coast of Odessa, circling around Crimea or following the open sea route, to reach the waters off Kandıra? This is the most crucial point of the investigation, because this is an area monitored 24/7 by the Turkish Navy, with one of the world's most advanced radar networks. Is this 600-kilometer journey of death just a feat of battery and motor power? Or did Ankara approach this operation with diplomatic blindness? Let's lay out the scenarios. The first theory could be commercial camouflage. Ukrainian intelligence, GUR, did not send these drones out into the open sea alone. Most likely, these drones hid in the shadow of the intense commercial ship traffic in the Black Sea. With a radar cross-section, RCS, almost as small as a seagull, these vehicles infiltrated Turkish territorial waters by hiding behind the magnetic and radar traces of giant container ships. This is called traffic masking in military literature. However, evading Turkish radars is not that easy. This leads us to the second theory, which is darker and more strategic. Our second theory could be Ankara's shadow discomfort. Turkey has been meticulously enforcing the Montreux Straits Convention for months. However, Russia's shadow fleet of scrap ships poses a massive environmental threat to the Bosphorus. The risk of Istanbul being covered in oil for months in the event of a possible accident was testing Ankara's patience. Could the "my enemy's enemy" equation have come into play here? Even if Turkey did not actively share intelligence with Ukraine, could it have turned a blind eye to this cleanup operation in its own territorial waters? In diplomacy, this is called tacit approval. The message is clear. Ankara may not be able to tell Russia, "Don't let these scrap ships pass through my straits." But by not objecting to Ukraine punishing these ships in open waters before they entered the straits, it has indirectly sent the strongest message to the Kremlin. How did Ukraine's drones find that coordinate as if they had placed it there themselves? The answer may not be in Ankara, but in the phone in your pocket. AIS, Automatic Identification System. These ships had to be visible in civilian maritime traffic. Ukraine could have tracked the route of these ships second by second using only open-source data, OSINT, like marine traffic. Whatever the outcome, one fact remains unchanged. Turkish radars saw something that night. But Ankara may have chosen to allow those things to strike Russia's illegal fleet. This is not an allegation, just an inference, and it is within the realm of possibility. This is not the end of Turkey's neutrality, but the moment when international patience with Russia's shadow fleet ran out. This situation proves that Russia's surveillance and interdiction capabilities in the Black Sea have completely collapsed. While the Russian Black Sea fleet pulls its ships into Novorossiysk to protect its own ports, it has turned the middle and south of the Black Sea entirely into a hunting ground for Ukrainian drones. Radars are blind, patrol ships are trapped in ports. This incident proves that Russia's surveillance capacity in the Black Sea has completely collapsed. However, this attack was not isolated. The flames in Kandıra were actually the continuation of a much larger fire, because Putin's last stronghold in the Black Sea, Novorossiysk, was also falling. To understand this, we only need to rewind 2 weeks. Putin painted a picture of horror, but the response he received was much more terrifying, much faster, and much more humiliating. Putin launched a ruthless attack on Kiev on November 13th. Within hours, on the night of November 14th, Ukrainian missiles turned the port of Novorossiysk into a hellish scene. The scale of this attack was so colossal and catastrophic that the Russian governor was forced to declare a state of emergency in the city. Turkish sailors at the port recorded those hellish moments that lit up the night. Now, this is going to be a controversial topic, and I don't care if YouTube doesn't promote it. I'm going to expose the truth anyways. Controversial topics like this one end up getting suppressed by the algorithm, except when you force the algorithm to promote it by clicking on the like button. Thank you.
It's been going on for an hour. They hit the refinery. They hit the ship. They hit the refinery again.
Comments on social media were clear. Very beautiful. The S-400 systems protecting the port, the warehouses in the port, the petrol stations, and the piers were destroyed. Ukraine had leveled them with a combination of Neptune missiles with a range of 1,000 kilometers and drones. And confirmation came from the highest level directly from Zelensky. This was the first major strike by Ukraine's indigenous pride, the 1,000-kilometer range Long Neptune cruise missiles. The Russians were blindly relying on the 12 S-400 Triumph launchers they had piled up at the port. Air defense systems are in panic mode, firing into the sky without knowing what they're hitting. And immediately after, silence and a massive secondary explosion. The shield had fallen. Remember that hellish scene recorded by Turkish sailors? Those very nice comments were about more than just a burning oil terminal. What they witnessed was the helpless burning of 12 S-400 launchers belonging to the 1,537th Anti-Aircraft Missile Regiment. The Russians had blindly trusted the 12 S-400 Triumph launchers they had piled up at the port. However, the SBU Alpha unit set up a brilliant combined trap. First, kamikaze UAVs like FP-1 and FP-2 were sent ahead as bait. The goal was not to hit the launchers, but to force the expensive S-400 radars to light up, confuse them, and keep them busy. While Russian air defense operators were locked onto these cheap targets, the real deadly blow came from the low-flying, highly maneuverable Long Neptune missiles. The moment the shield fell, the second phase of the operation began. The Russian Ministry of Defense issued a statement saying, "We shot down 66 UAVs in the Krasnodar region." Perhaps that is true, but this does not change the fact that the main force has reached its target. They have now turned their attention to the defenseless economic heartland. Primary target, the Sheskharis oil terminal, owned by the Russian state-owned monopoly Transneft. Tank farms, critical pumping facilities, and loading docks where giant tankers docked were hit one by one. Hours after the attack, the Russian state monopoly Transneft was forced to make an official statement. All operations at the Novorossiysk port have been suspended. Do you know what this means? It means that 1/5, 20%, of Russia's seaborne oil exports came to a halt overnight. It means a 2% disruption in global oil supply. As soon as news of the attack broke, global Brent oil prices immediately jumped by 2% to 3%. Putin needed this oil to cover the costs of the war he started in Ukraine. Now that oil is burning in his own port. This means that the flow of money into the war chest has been cut off overnight. As we mentioned earlier, that revenge fire in Novorossiysk didn't just hit Russian oil. Putin's incompetence also hit his ally, Kazakhstan. The attack also temporarily shut down the Caspian Pipeline Consortium, CPC terminal, which is right next door. Putin has now become an unreliable partner who can no longer protect his allies and is even holding their economies hostage for his own war. And right then, another blow came from the east. Japan announced harsh sanctions, synchronized with Ukraine, against the shadow fleet Russia uses to smuggle oil from ports like Novorossiysk. This is a nightmare scenario for Putin. While Ukraine physically destroys Putin's oil bridge in Novorossiysk, economic giants like Japan are legally sinking the shadow fleet tankers Russia uses to bypass that bridge. Putin has become such a risky partner that even buyers like China are forced to increase imports from Saudi Arabia to fill the gap in Russian oil. So why would two burning chunks of metal off the coast of Kandıra turn the life of a bureaucrat in Moscow or a refinery worker in Siberia into a nightmare? If you view this attack only as a military success, or separately from the attacks on Novorossiysk, you will miss the massive economic disaster beneath the iceberg, or rather, beneath the burning oil. This attack created a ripple effect in Russia's already fragile war economy. And this wave is approaching the shore, poised to hit the Kremlin's coffers. There is a simple rule in the maritime world. If there is risk, the price increases. Until now, Russia has used its own state-backed and internationally questionable companies or shady third-party insurers to insure its shadow fleet vessels. However, the repeated targeting of Novorossiysk and the striking of ships in a region like Kandıra, a major artery of international traffic and considered safe, has changed the entire equation. The entire Black Sea has now entered a war risk zone status for insurance companies and ship captains. What does this mean? Ship owners who dare, or are greedy enough, to transport Russian oil will now have to double, triple, or even quadruple their freight rates. Russia will now have to spend the profits it makes from oil sold above the $60 per barrel limit on exorbitant freight charges and astronomical insurance premiums. On the other hand, the port of Novorossiysk, Russia's main outlet on the Black Sea, handles about 20% of the country's oil exports. What happens if ships refuse to come to this port for fear of being hit, or if it becomes impossible to find ships? Oil piles up in the ports. This is a logistical nightmare. Oil cannot be stored in a warehouse like a pair of shoes produced in a factory. It flows continuously through pipelines. If you cannot load it onto ships and send it, your storage tanks will fill up. When the tanks are full, refineries will have to slow down or even halt production. That's a real system failure for you. When refineries shut down, it's not just exports that stop. Gasoline and diesel production in Russia's domestic market also halted. Indian and Chinese refineries that buy Putin's oil will continue this trade as long as it is cheap and reliable. However, when the Black Sea route turns into a game of Russian roulette, that reliability is gone. Why would an Indian buyer take the risk of the oil they paid for burning up at the entrance to the Bosphorus? Turning to alternatives, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, becomes a commercial necessity. This situation means Russia will permanently lose market share. Once you lose a customer, you have to make much bigger concessions to get them back. With a single drone, a single Neptune missile, Ukraine has delivered a strategic checkmate to Russia's multi-billion-dollar market strategy. The Black Sea is no longer a Russian lake. It is a dead end for the Russian economy. Do you think this economic blockade will bring Putin to his knees? And how do you interpret Ankara's silence on this matter? Let's meet in the comments. Thank you for watching us.